Hey folks, I want to let you know about the sponsor of today's episode, Stream. Stream powers chat messaging activity feeds for billions of global end users across thousands of different apps. So if you want to do anything with chat or feeds, then you definitely want to take a look at Stream and their awesome SDK. They have SDKs not only for iOS, but Android as well as React, Unreal, Angular, Unity, Flutter, and more. They obsess over their API and its ease of use for its customers and provide awesome tutorials for their developer teams. So if you're looking at adding any sort of messaging to your app, Stream and Stream Chat is going to be the easiest way to do it in your iOS app. They provide all sorts of high-level UI components to connect Stream Chat API with minimal coding. If you're on iOS, they have both SDKs and Swift packages available for UIKit as well as Swift UI. Go ahead and click on the link in the show notes below to try Stream Chat for free for 30 days, or apply for your Maker account, free forever, or qualifying teams. If you're looking at adding any sort of messaging or activity feeds to your app, then Stream is definitely the way you're going to want to go. Accelerate your launch, focus on your app rather than having to worry about all sorts of problems with networking and messaging and social feeds, and grow your app. Stream is trusted by thousands of companies, more than 1 billion end users to reliably scale regardless of demand. Go ahead and click on the link in the show notes below to give Stream a try today. Thank you, Stream, for sponsoring today's episode. Welcome to another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dion. Today, I'm joined by Jordi Bruin. Jordi, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to have you on finally.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. We had some time zone issues this morning, but I'm glad we managed to get it to work today.
Yes. It would have been a very early morning for me.
Yeah,
so I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, I don't know how many 2 a.m. recordings you do, but this is probably better for both of us.
Yeah, I don't think the rest of the family would really appreciate my podcast recording at 2 a.m. Maybe the littlest guy, because he's always up in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah.
I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jordi Bruin. I'm an indie developer from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I started developing about 4 or 5 years ago. I used to be a designer at an agency, taught myself to program, and since about 1.5 years now, I've been full indie on my own apps. Did some freelance stuff before, but I much prefer working on my own things. So I think I launched about 20 apps in the last 2-3 years, ranging from iOS to macOS, watchOS, and anything in between. People might know me from an app I make called Vivid that raises the brightness of your MacBook to doubles the brightness. I was nominated for an Apple Design Award this year for Navi, which adds subtitles and live translation to FaceTime. And right now I'm also working on Posture Pal, which uses the motion sensors in your Airpods to help you improve your posture. So I just try to work with new technologies and make stuff I like.
Is Navi, is that like a Zelda reference or something?
Yeah, it was, yeah. So I actually had to remove it from sale this 2 weeks ago because it doesn't work on iOS 16 anymore, but it was a little Navi thing, a little Zelda. Hey, listen.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up before we jump into the main topic, and we've talked about this on a few episodes when we did Mac stuff with Matt and Sarah. You sell your apps on Gumroad. How do you like that? And what made you pick Gumroad for selling apps? Because isn't it usually more like books and stuff?
Yeah, so Gumroad is basically a website where people can sell digital stuff. I think they can also sell physical stuff, but digital stuff I think is mostly used there. I had used it last year when I was selling a talk I gave, and then I started putting like small Mac apps up on there, and it was Mac apps that were using private APIs, so they wouldn't be allowed on the Mac App Store. And it's been working pretty well so far. You pay a less commission, which, I mean, the difference between Apple's and Gumroad's not that big, but it's actually quite nice. You get this direct connection with your customers. So I can email them if there's updates. I can let them know about other apps that I'm working on. And so far it's working really well. And actually just a few minutes ago, the Mac App Store version of Vivid got through app review for test flight. So we're going to try to see if we can actually get it on the Mac App Store as well. Because I think a lot of people still prefer getting their apps on the Mac also through the Mac App Store. So yeah, it was in that moment, it was just something that would help us ship it quicker. And so far it's been really nice.
Um, is with Vivid, I assume, I guess that doesn't use any like private APIs or anything, does it?
It used to do in the past, especially for if you had like an external keyboard and we were intercepting the brightness key so that we could like do stuff with the brightness based on your actual keys without having to use other shortcuts. And we were doing some fancy stuff there with Metal. Bit too complicated to get into now without showing code examples
Yeah.
and stuff, but a lot of that stuff we don't need anymore. So we made
Okay.
sort of a stripped down version now. So it should be good.
Awesome. So today I wanted to talk about two things, and we'll start off talking about your app, Posture Pal, which, if people haven't taken a look, should definitely give it a try. It's awesome. It uses your AirPods essentially to make sure that your posture is correct. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. So the AirPods Pro and also the AirPods Max and the AirPods third generation, they all have these motion sensors in them, and they're mostly used initially by Apple for the spatial audio. So when you move around, the soundscape actually moves around with you. So if you look to the right, you hear the instruments on the right closer to you. And since I think iOS 14, there's been an addition to the Core Motion API called CM Headphone Motion Manager, which basically allows you to tap into that stream of X, Y, and Z rotation that you get from the AirPods. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with that for apps in general, like maybe just make your app move based on what you're doing. But I used to have this little thing you would plug on the back of your neck that would basically vibrate if your posture was not good. Cost €90. You would have to stick it on your neck. It felt quite, like a
I've seen
cyborg
the
robot.
Facebook ads. As somebody who's quite familiar with posture issues and RSI, yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I thought initially it was quite nice, but it never stuck with me because, you had to stick this thing. It always felt a bit off. And then I came across the API, I think somewhere last year, and I was talking with a friend about just posture in general. And then I think, maybe I can make something with this. So I took some sample project from GitHub, and within like 2 minutes, I had a version that just said posture good, posture bad, by just looking at a certain value. And it's like, I guess there's something here. Let's see if I can make it into an app. And then spent about a month trying to make it way too complicated with 3D characters and learning all these things that I didn't know yet. So I ended up not shipping that version. And then in March this year, I decided, okay, let me just start from scratch, try to make it as simple as possible. And in about a month, me and Victoria, who was my intern at the time, we basically made the first version that launched in April. And it was really nice. I found out it became the app of the month in China in April, which
nice.
There's not a lot of months, and there's a lot of people in China, so it's like, that's quite a nice experience.
By the way, localize your apps. It's worth it sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially for this one, because I learned a lot about Chinese and simplified Chinese versus traditional Chinese, and they're very aware of that. So I had some strings in traditional Chinese instead of simplified and the other way around, and got quite some remarks about that. So there's a lot, like a very large part of users in the world that just don't speak any language other than their own. So I was luckily able that a lot of people from the community, people that follow me on Twitter, helped me out with translating the app. So I think right now it's 25 different languages or something, because it's not a lot of strings, but it really helps because the experience it's much easier for people that don't speak another language to be able to use it. So
yeah, that's awesome. So the API basically gives you access to the motion of your AirPods. How did that work? Like, I guess you found that GitHub project that helped a lot, but I guess what's going on behind the scenes?
It's actually not that crazy. It's very similar to just the Core Motion if you would use it on your phone, where you get the rotation access for your phone. But now you get it from the AirPods. So the only thing is that the AirPods need to be connected. They need to support it. So there's stuff there, of course. But other than that, it's just a stream of up to 25 hertz a second. Depends on network connection, Bluetooth connection, whatever. But 25 is more than enough for most use cases. So I guess if you get below 5 hertz or something, you would start getting maybe choppy things if you would do something based on the movement of your head. But you basically get a stream of data, and then you can use that data to make certain determinations about, okay, what does this mean about the user's position compared to the last 5 minutes, last 10 minutes, or are they just like slouching in general? And yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do with that.
So how are you able to take that data in and update your UI accordingly? Like, are you using UIKit or Swift UI?
Since I started working on my own stuff in 2020, I've only done Swift UI with every now and then
Okay.
like little sidestep to UIKit, but I try to prevent it as much as I can because last few weeks I've been doing some UIKit and I'm super rusty at it. And yeah, I prefer to just then make the UI a little bit different so that it's easier to make in Swift UI. But so what I did in PostureBell is basically there's this mascot in the app in the form of a giraffe, like a drawing of a giraffe.
I love it.
And thanks. And there's two new ones now. So, but initially it was just a giraffe, and basically the giraffe moves based on your movement. So it's sort of a visual representation of your posture. But in initial phase, it was only like just your forward and backward posture, which gives it a very, very clear view of, okay, are you doing well or you're not doing well? The giraffe gets more sad over time if your posture is worse. It gets better if you're sitting up straight. Makes a little sound if you're wrong. So I try to take this stream of data that's quite complex, although it's just doubles, right? But in terms of it's information about the position of your AirPods, and try to just narrow it down for a person like, okay, are you doing good? Are you doing bad? Or are you doing great? And by basically trying to make it simpler for people to take action upon that. And then, yeah, so that's one axis of rotation. And obviously you can also do stuff with, is your neck straight? Are you tilting it in a certain way? All these things really matter for posture, especially if you're sitting for longer term. So last few months, I've been talking to a lot of physical therapists as well, trying to understand more about it, because I'm not an expert on posture at all. Which also is like, you don't have to be an expert on whatever you're making as long as you don't claim to be that. Like the initial version of the app was just very basic. It's like, okay, is your posture good or bad compared to these certain stats? So you could change the sensitivity for your own, whatever works for you. But it already helps people in a way, and then they give you feedback, and then on that you can improve. So I just started with keeping it very simple. Okay, this is information I have. Let's try to make it binary or almost binary so that people can take action from there.
Were there any issues technically with getting that data and displaying it on the screen without like overdoing it or taking up too much memory or too much CPU or battery?
Yeah, so
you know what I mean?
Initially, sometimes Swift UI still don't know what I'm doing, but initially, every time there would be like a new data point would arrive, all my Swift UI views would re-render. So you can imagine 25 times a second, all the views in the app getting re-rendered, 90% CPU usage or something for a week there. So had to do some refactoring there to make that observable object like separate and have it be its own thing. And those are also the things that are quite difficult to determine when you're just testing it on the simulator, because if you're making something that requires an external thing, you always have to have that thing connected and always be using it and always be like moving your head. And it's quite tedious to test some of this stuff, especially the longer term stuff, if you want to test how the app works over 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour. So a lot of the times for that, I would work with test data to just make the app work. But then obviously you need to also be using it with actual AirPods to see what data comes in. And it's actually an interesting bug that I still haven't fully solved, because it's more complicated than I currently understand. Is that the AirPods actually need to be connected to the phone, and they need to be in a certain state. So it can't just be that they're connected in a semi-way. They actively have to be like active. So you have to go to Control Center and click on them. And what happens sometimes is when your AirPods are connected to your iPad or your Mac as well, the AirPods get into this weird state where they're changing between like what device they're currently linked to, which gives me weird data, and it's very hard to reproduce as well in a consistent way. So there's some of that stuff there, because the API itself is only available for iOS. So even though you can import the Score Motion and you can add the function to your watchOS app or macOS app, it just won't give back any data. So something a lot of people would like is to use it on macOS, but that doesn't work. So there's some user experience things there that could be improved. But that's also, it's just very difficult to go through all these scenarios with someone opening the app when the AirPods are not connected, opening it, but they're connected, but also connected to an iPad, or they're switching to an iPad, and then they go back to the phone.
Right.
And yeah, I haven't really found the perfect way to handle that, but it's definitely
Right.
something that I'm trying to figure out.
Is it
Yeah.
is it all like Bluetooth under the scenes, essentially, like communicating with the device?
Yeah, so it's completely, I think opaque is the opposite of transparent, right? Where like I have
Yeah.
no clue how it's getting it. I'm just getting the data from the APIs, but I would assume
Right.
it's just it piggybacks on the Bluetooth connection that's going on between the AirPods and the phone. But as a developer, you don't really have to do anything there in terms of setting up a Bluetooth connection or doing
Nice.
anything. Yeah.
That's a big relief. Yeah. What's been like the most difficult part? So it sounds like testing is probably a real pain. I can understand that as somebody who develops for the Apple Watch. I totally get that.
Yeah.
What else has been really difficult in building the app?
Mm. I think what's been most difficult for me was to determine, okay, what should I put in and what should I not put in the app? And so that's also where the first version of the app stranded, basically trying to do too many things or too ambitious. And once I started narrowing it down, it became so much easier. So just doing small updates every time, sometimes I was doing like 3 updates a week, but just adding small things without making it too complex for me to oversee the total thing. Because especially at the start, there were a lot of different areas that I've never used before. So a lot of things I had to learn. And by keeping it small, it kept it easier for me. And I did a big update now for iOS 16 where I actually added core data, which was the first time I've ever used core data in an app. So there was some learnings there, still some learnings there, but yeah, trying to make sure that the experience works well, even after adding more and more features. So I think now I've got sort of a foundation that I can more easily build on, but it took a while. So the first version released in April, then did 10 to 12 updates, I think, in that month or the month and a half after that. And then over the summer, kind of took it easy because I knew that I wanted to just add the new features to iOS 16 only. So right now I've got a branch in my app where it basically says, okay, iOS 15 users just get the old stuff, no core data, no advanced characters, whatever. And then all the new stuff goes to the iOS 16 branch only, so I can focus on, okay, I know I have all these things that I can depend on. And
Right.
yeah, that kind of helped me to keep it manageable and to actually ship it and to actually keep improving it. But I think other than that, yeah, there were not a lot of things that are super, super difficult. It was mostly just, okay, keep it small. And then that way it's easier for me to understand what I need to do.
I want to go back to the thing you were saying about testing with simulator. How did you create the test data, and then how did you allow your
Run it
app
back.
to consume? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Because I know, like, I played around with like HealthKit. There's a few things you can do in HealthKit with test data, and there's like you can fake location sometimes, but I'm not aware of how you do that with motion stuff. And
Yeah.
how did you go about making your app available to that, I guess?
Yeah. So what I do basically is when a user starts tracking, they create a session, and that session has an array of stances. It stands basically every second when you're using the app, it checks, okay, what's your current position, and then saves that.
Mm-hmm.
Once a second is more than enough to actually make a meaningful data set. So what I usually do is I have an array of I have sample sessions, great posture, bad posture, posture where it was good for a while, good, then worse, then good again, or then bad. And I basically just load that session in, and based on that, I do calculation, check, okay, is it going to display everything correctly? Is the score calculated in the right way? And I've thought about making something where I just make a stream, like play back a session so that it would actually go through it. But for my use cases, it hasn't really been super necessary because I can just, based on I just do certain calculations on the entire stances array. And based on that, I can highlight, okay, these were the areas where someone had an interruption, or these were the areas where they were likely to go into bad posture. So I can just do that afterwards, basically, on the whole data set instead of having to do it in real time.
Okay.
And because it's quite consistent when you're actually using the AirPods, it's just, okay, you get these coordinates for your position. So I can very specifically test certain things there, but just, okay, let me now put in the AirPods and do this specific motion. okay, it triggers it, yes or no. But I can already do that afterwards without having to do sort of a stream of test data.
Right. Okay. What else do you want to talk about when it comes to the Core Motion API and Posture Pal?
So the biggest request I got from day one was an Apple Watch app, but because the API is not available on Apple Watch, it was just never possible. And I always wanted to do something with it, but I never really figured out a way how. But now this week, I've actually been able to make a version. So it's probably, so you can't really see it now, but basically what it does is it does all the tracking on your phone and then sends it over to watchOS as the messages stuff, the watch connectivity API.
Okay.
So that's been interesting now to figure out, okay, how can I make it more useful for people? Because people don't want to look at their phone to get updates. So you can get a sound notification or a vibration or a local notification or a watch feedback eventually as well.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff I can play around with there, because it's not necessarily an app that goes very very technical, very complex. So it's much more for me about how can I make the experience nicer. So it's also fun to play around with these things. Okay, maybe I can make a watch app for it that makes it more fun to use. Or obviously there's a lot I can do in terms of making the information that you get from the app more usable.
Right.
But yeah.
So if you're playing music on your phone and connect, like, you could still use the app at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There are some scenarios where if you're going into certain audio modes in other apps, it will shut down the watch sensor connection, like the Airpods sensor connection.
Yeah.
I've gotten some feedback about that, but I have not really been able to find one clear thing that's causing it. And also, I obviously don't have control over what other apps people are using. So,
right. Well, I'm wondering if it like shuts it down to save battery if you're not using like the head tracking.
So
the audio player.
Yeah, so from my understanding, as long as you're connected to the AirPods and like the active output for the phone, it works. And the nice thing is, it even works with one AirPod, so you can in theory just only wear one to do this tracking and save battery that way for your AirPods. So, because I think that movement is probably also used for other stuff in the OS that maybe we don't know about, besides the spatial audio. Because I think, for example, if you send an email in the Mail app, you hear this whoosh sound, that's spatial audio. So I think it always needs to be ready for that stuff. Because I think in theory, if you send the mail, then quickly look to the right, you should hear the sound move. And yeah, I think other than that, it's probably just so low level that it doesn't have a lot of overhead for the connection. But I don't know enough about that to say anything meaningful.
How's been your experience with watch connectivity?
So I had to figure out a bit of which APIs were actually the ones to use now, because there's obviously a lot of information available on watchOS that's outdated. And not a lot of like good sample projects. I downloaded some from Apple, and then they were not running based on the sample project. And it turns out I had to add the parent app to the watch app or something, and just a lot of stuff, trial and error. So far, it's been really good, actually, once I got it to work. So now it can just basically send through all the motion data in real time to the watch. So it's just as responsive as it is looking on your phone. I have to check, like, okay, how does that impact battery life? But from what I've seen so far, it shouldn't really matter, because that connection is already there, just piggybacking on that connection between the phone and the watch. So for me, it's now much more about, okay, how should a watchOS app work, and what interaction should I have there? And I've only made one watchOS app, and it was, I think, more than a year ago.
It's changed a lot.
Yeah, exactly, and especially with the sort of the new design patterns in watchOS 9 and even 8, and I don't have a watch. I have a Series 4, I think, so I don't have the always on display. So there's some stuff there that I need to better understand. So that's sort of my progress now with the watchOS, trying to figure out what should I be building here and what should I keep out of it.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the dynamic island. You got a brand new iPhone 14 Pro,
Yeah,
Pro or Pro Max?
just a Pro.
Okay.
Yeah, the Max is too big for me. Ideally, I think I would like a 14 Mini Pro or something.
Yeah.
Because I mean, while I've got pretty big hands, so it's not a big thing for me. But I wish my phone was just a smaller part of my life. I guess just, but with keeping all the battery and the good cameras and everything, so it's probably just not feasible in terms of
Right. Yeah.
physics. But yeah. So because I knew I wanted to do some stuff with the dynamic islands, and I guess I usually try to always get the new Pro model every year just to be able
Mhm.
to use the new technologies there. So when the 12 Pro came out, I was super excited about the lidar sensor, trying to figure out, okay, what kind of things can I make with that? And it's very hard to come up with ideas if you don't have the hardware to test it, and you always have to rely
Right.
on simulated performance or just to understand the technology a bit more. So for me this year was mostly the dynamic island, which I'm working on some stuff with, trying to figure out, okay, what can you make with this? And the
Mhm.
always on display is nice as well, although I'm still in the phase where I'm like, oh, is my phone on? Oh no, it's just the so
Yeah,
where
that'll
it's
take
still
some getting used to. So
yeah. And I noticed
what's been your biggest lesson with the dynamic island?
um, just trying to understand how people would actually use it. So obviously, you can to do updates in the background, you would need to either use background tasks or remote notifications. And
Okay.
if you don't do any of those things, it's kind of a static display of some information, especially if the app cannot update it. So like what kind of things do you want to see up there? And that's also one of the things that you don't really know if you don't have a phone that actually has the feature, so you don't see it in your day-to-day life. So
Right.
um, for me, I started a sample project once the API came out, and it's this GitHub repo that maybe we can link in the show notes or something, where
Yeah.
there's just examples of how you can recreate some of the things that Apple makes to become more familiar with it. And that helped me really, okay, first of all, understand the API, because it's not a super complex API. It works differently than widgets, so there's no timeline and everything. But to display stuff there, it's actually not that hard, and it's more about, okay, what kind of information do my apps have that I would want to put in there? So obviously, I would want to have something for posture pal where you can like see your current stance, maybe see your score and a quick overview without having to open the app. But in order
Yeah.
to do that with a lot of data, you would have to update the dynamic island, and that's not possible technically right now. Um, so for me, it's mostly been trying to figure out, okay, what kind of information would make sense to have always visible in your screen at the top.
So you said you can update it with remote notifications, background tasks. How about did they plug any of the live activity stuff in there?
So the dynamic island is basically a live activity. So
Okay.
the
That's what I
lock
thought.
screen, the lock screen is a variation of the dynamic. Yeah, it's part of live activity basically. So you
Yeah.
when you make your live activity, you say, okay, this is my lock screen view. This is my trailing, my compact leading. So that's for the ones on top.
Hmm.
And then when you expand them, there's a different view for that. And then within that, there's different views. So it's basically all the same API. So if you want to make an app for the dynamic islands, you also have to do one for the lock screen. So it's not like you can just, okay, I'm just going to make a dynamic island stuff. And that's also nice because that means that people with older phones or with non 14 Pro phones will also get these experiences. And it also makes it like a much wider appeal, I think, for users if they come across these things on their lock screen and then they want to have apps
Right.
that update
Especially with
that.
all it was on screen.
Yeah, definitely. So the nice thing is when you let me see, okay, I don't have any music playing now, but for example, the live activities are always visible there in the bottom. So there's a lot of stuff you can do there, like, okay, what would I want to always see there that goes further than what the lock screen widgets can do? Because the lock screen widgets are obviously limited in space and where they go,
Hmm.
but it's basically gives you the opportunity to have sort of a larger, colorful, semi-interactive lock screen widget that you can tap on and do stuff with, and it opens the app each time. But yeah, it's just a lot of opportunities that are now available, and that can really, I think, enhance a lot of apps, and you can make a lot of new cool things around it. Yeah.
So if you already have an app, what do you think is the first thing somebody should do if they want to support it, and whether they should even support live activities in the dynamic island?
Mm. I think any app that has something that's ongoing. So I see a lot of examples now of cooking apps where you follow a recipe and there's either a timer or something, or you want to see what step are you on right now.
Yeah.
Those are things that are nice to see while you're doing it without having to keep the app open. Obviously, apps for sports, there's a lot of interesting things there where you want to give information to the user, but they don't necessarily need to open your full app because they just want to see, okay, what's the score between team 1, team 2, and maybe some extra information about the match. So I think you have anything that's ongoing and time sensitive, and that's also what the human interface guidelines for the dynamic island stuff now say is, okay, yeah, that's where it's a very good use case. I think also a lot of apps you open the app, you do a certain thing, and then you want to come back to that certain thing once or twice, maybe over the next few hours. So if you can give you a sort of a shortcut to get to that thing without having to find your app or swipe down, it's always there or always on your lock screen.
Right.
I think that's also where it becomes interesting, because once you use an app and then you lock your phone and then you open your phone again because you want to open that app, if the information you're looking for is already on your lock screen, or an entryway into that specific screen, for example, on your app is already on your lock screen, that obviously makes it easier for people. It keeps your app top of mind, which can be nice as well because you want people to go
it's
to your app.
It's kind of like a watch complication where it's just like always there and kind of keeping your app going.
Yeah, exactly. And then you click on it, you always see some information, and when you click it, you immediately go into your app. So
yep.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of fun things to try out there, even if your app is not a default candidate of what makes sense for the live activities. Because you can just come up, okay, like what kind of views do I have in my app? Okay, let me just try, what if I put that view in a live activity? Okay, how would I use that? What situations would I use that for? And it could be that there's just nothing in your app that makes sense to display there, and that can also be perfectly fine, as long as you don't get to a situation where someone does something in your app and then they expect the app to stay visible there at the top when they close it out for whatever reason. So I think people can also get a bit creative there with their use cases and try to figure out, okay, what can I add to the user's lock screen or to the dynamic islands?
Yeah. Yep. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we close out?
I mean, we can talk about macOS stuff, of course, because I've been doing a lot of that lately, but you've already had a lot of macOS stuff in the last few episodes. Is there anything? Let me see. Yeah, so right now, for example, with Gumroad, for Vivid, it's not necessarily macOS related, but the license validation server is actually not reachable from China, which obviously it's quite annoying if you have Chinese customers as well.
Whose fault is that? Is that China or is that Gumroad?
Yeah, I think
Great Firewall.
Yeah, there's some of that stuff, and I think it's very. I don't know enough about the network layers there, but I think it's probably not something that can easily be solved by Gumroad externally.
Yeah.
So that's just one of the things that this week I've been trying to figure out with Ben, like what will be a good alternative for that, and how can we get around that kind of stuff. In reality, yeah, like, okay, there's only so much you can solve there, and there's only so far you can go, and we don't want to spend 40, 50, 80 hours working on license stuff. So maybe then the alternative is, okay, we just won't be able to support that kind of thing. But those are interesting challenges now that you don't necessarily have to deal with when you're on the App Store. So yeah, that's something we've been playing around with, and actually trying to bring Vivid to iOS as well. So on macOS, we're doing.
I've seen that. Yeah. Is there a test flight for that?
There is, and we just had a big update this week. So let's see. I'm not sure if you can see it here, but so
yeah, I mean, it looks bright.
Let's see if I can. So this is normally the max brightness, and you're probably not going to see it properly here, but it's just been really nice, and I'm not sure if we'll get approved for it, but it's been a fun thing that we worked on the last 2 weeks here and there, and it's just fun to make these things. Once you know one thing from one app that you've made, then say, okay, what else can I do with this, and how else can I use it? And we got some questions from other developers asking, hey, can I maybe put that in my app so that they can have a certain app in their or view in their app that they can make very bright. So it's like, I mean, we might as well just pass it on because we're just going to put this out
for either cheap or free. I don't really know. So yeah, those are also just some nice things. And just now, so the Mac App Store version for Tesla got approved. So we're going to try to get it on the App Store, which I think would also be nice because I think that could solve our Chinese license thing as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Then we can just redirect people to get it from the App Store itself. So yeah, there's just a lot of fun little challenges here and there, and yeah, keeping myself busy and getting stuff ready for iOS 16.1 with the dynamic island stuff.
Nice. I think I just have one more question. How do you know that idea is worth pursuing or not?
Yeah.
And how do you as opposed to like just being like, okay, yeah, this is a great API, but it's not going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have this method that I made for myself called the 2-2-2 method, where basically whenever I want to make something new or I get an idea, I need to be able to make the very first version that works for me in 2 hours. So that can mean, okay,
Nice.
I have to either strip out features or ideas, but it just needs to be something that I can use. So it can be very ugly. So for example, for Posture Pal, the first version was just a screen that would say posture good, posture bad, and it would make a sound when your posture is bad. So you could leave it on.
Mm-hmm.
Ugly, only I would be able to use it. It was like very hard coded. Then I spend maximum 2 days making a version I can share with friends. So that takes out the hard coded stuff so that it works for other people as well. It can still be a bit ugly. And then I try to release it within 2 weeks. So by having these hard deadlines for myself, it makes it very easy to say, okay, yeah, I need to skip all these features because otherwise I won't be able to get it in 2 weeks. But even before that, so before those first 2 hours, I need to already know in my head, how am I going to build that first version, the 2 hour version? Because by already thinking about it, you think, okay, I basically do these steps and write this code and make these views. And then once you get to the computer, all you have to do is just get it out of your head and on the computer. So you don't have to do the thinking anymore because you've already done it over time to figure out, okay, is this worth doing? So a lot of ideas I've had, I'm just not able to do in 2 hours. So I just don't do them. So hopefully the API becomes easier next year, or I learn some new skills from another project so that now I can do it in 2 hours. So that takes away sort of that challenge, or well, not challenge, but it takes away the worry of, okay, is it going to be worth my investment? Because I know all these ideas are going to be small, and by releasing them quickly, like worst case, I don't release them, but then I still have this knowledge from making this prototype. So I have a lot of projects I've never like shipped, but I often go back to them to copy some code from them for another project to make the 2 hours easier for a new project because I already did the work somewhere else.
Right.
And I think now I'm at the point where I have so many different things out that I don't really care too much if each of them does great or does super well. So there's not a hard like deadline for me, or not a hard like cutoff point, like it's not doing good enough. But I think it's mostly just make something that you want to use yourself, and then worst case, you're the only person that uses it, and then it's already valuable. And because otherwise you're always making something for someone that you don't really know, and then it's very hard as well to iterate on it and to know what you need to be working on. So that's kind of my approach. Yeah. And I did a talk about that recently. So that video just came out. So it should be on my Twitter and stuff as well if people want to see some more information. But I gave examples of the last 5 projects and how I use that method to say, okay, yeah, this is something I want to work on.
I'm definitely going to check that out because I think one of my vices is always starting something new. And yeah, I like that 2-2-2. I don't know about 2 hours. Seems like not enough for me, but my ideas are always overly complicated. But
do you use Swift UI or mostly UIKit and AppKit stuff?
Swift UI. All OSs, Watch, iOS, Mac.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that made so much stuff easier because that 2 hours, if you don't worry about design and stuff, just use all the basic components. That already takes away a lot of thinking because you don't have to think, okay, how is it going to look?
Yeah.
And then it's just, okay, what's this super big idea that you have? Okay, what's the core of that? And then maybe what's the core of that even? Because that first 2 hours doesn't have to solve the entire problem. That's what the 2 weeks are for, basically. But it should be like, okay, is this something that could technically work? Is there something here? And then you can go from there. But worst case, you have something that you made that works that you can then stew on. And maybe 5 months later, you pick it back up again. But yeah, obviously that takes some I'm not sure if it's a skill, but it takes something you have where you can say, okay, I'm just going to do this part and still be okay with it. Because I've had times where I worked on a project for 6 months.
Feature creep.
I just got stuck on the 90% after 6 months and never shipped it. Whereas, yeah, it's better just to have something that you can either ship either to yourself or to some friends or whatever, than to just keep working on it and continue on and on and on.
Yeah. Well, Jordi, thank you so much for coming on. This has been fantastic. I'm glad we could
likewise.
do
Thanks for the invite.
Where can people find you online?
So I'm mostly active on Twitter at Jordi Bruin, JordiBruin. So yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way for people to reach me. My DMs are open if people want to ask questions or just get feedback on something. Super happy to help. So
thank you so much. People can
thanks.
find me on Twitter at LeoGDM. My company is Bright Digit. Take some time to post a review on whatever podcast listener you're using. And if you're watching this, like and subscribe on YouTube, please. Thank you again. And I look forward to talking to you again. Bye, everyone.
Likewise. See you soon.